Okay, welcome to our discussion. We are now under the lesson 3 of the module 2, and this will be the coverage again for our midterm examination, for your upcoming midterm examination. So we have here the topic of Middle English. So as we all know, we already are done with the discussion of the Old English period, and suddenly the historical events led to many distractions, and destructive um, consequences. But those consequences definitely led to the development of the language or the English language. So, moment na itong gihisgot, okay, we are technically talking about the development of language, and the English language specifically has what we call periods, no? Naa sila yung gitawag ng mga periods on the specific stages or eras where the English language has an identity and has a specification and has a specific linguistic features. Tapos na sa Old English and the things that influenced the Old English period. Now we will talk about the Middle English period. After the Old English follows the Middle English. Mo ni ang sunod. Okay? So Middle English daw is a period, of course, of the English language that is spoken between the 11th and 15th centuries. So that is those are the presented years or centuries nga nag-exist or nahitabo sa Middle English. It is the language spoken between Old English and early modern English. The period of Middle English begins with the Norman Conquest. So I know that you are familiar with this historical event called the Norman Conquest, of course, led by William the Conqueror and Napoleon Bonaparte, okay? And ends with the introduction of the printing press in England, 1476. So, ang Norman Conquest, aside from influencing the Old English period, it highly influenced also the Middle English period. It led to many linguistic changes and started in the year 1066. Again, in 1066. So we proceed now to the lesson content. The historical background of what we are talking now is the history of the Middle English. It began with the Norman conquest in 1066 when the Normans, led by William the Conqueror. So William the Conqueror was another leader, no? He conquered England through his rules, through his ano sa pa ni? Through through his rules, invaded England and brought their language. So ang old Norman French na dala dito sa England. Okay, that's how it works when you are invading a place. For example, of course, your own language will be brought to another place or to another language. Hence, may influence of other people. To the country, the language, again, William Conqueror, apart from Napoleon Bonaparte, naapod si William the Conqueror. The language of the English people, Old English, underwent significant changes as a result of this invasion. So from the Old English, there is a transition, no? There was a transition sa language, a linguistic transition from Old English into Middle English. And there are significant changes now in terms of the pronunciation, in terms of the words, and in terms of the change of spelling and usage of those words. The period ended in the 15th century when the introduction of the printing press led to a standardization of the English language. So na-end siya pag-introduce sa printing press, katong nauso na ang printing, no? Kato na mga years sa 15th century. So what are the characteristics of Middle English? The characteristics ng Middle English is a significant number of changes. There is, of course, significant changes, no? Sa pronunciation, as I said, grammar and vocabulary compared to Old English. Naa siya mga pagbago, naa siya mga relevant changes nga atong manotice, no? One of the most significant changes was the loss of inflections. Meaning to say, some of the parts of the words were remove, no, some of the parts of the words, or other parts of the words are eliminated na, wala na siya, or it is those morphemes are no longer in use, no, wala na siya gamita. Either nouns, verbs, and adjectives were no longer inflected to indicate their grammatical roles. So for example, ang mga words nga na ay mga inflections. What do we mean by inflections? For example, magsumpay ka og morpheme nga U, letter U and letter N sa word nga like, no, na ay prefix nga un. So for example, kung mawala na ang unlike, it is a negative verb, and like is a positive verb, no, kay mag-like man ka, so that na ay change in grammatical category. The vocabulary of Middle English also saw significant changes, with many French and Latin words entering the language. Meaning to say, ang vocabulary ng Middle English na ay nabago, okay? There is what we call the influence or the words of the French language and the Latin language, okay? Tungod sa mga words nga bago, of course, mag-improve ang vocabulary. Same is true when you are reading, when you are encountering across a word nga wala ka maka-familiar, and then you search something, ang meaning ng word, and then ma-add sa imong vocabulary. Okay? Na dugangan ang imong mga knowledge nimo sa mga words. Okay? Now, we move forward sa sa literary works. I know that you're very familiar with the literary works. Now, it means that the written representations of the culture, written representations of the numerous ideas coming from the significant authors, no? Ang mga sinulat yun, mga novels, or may it be non-literary fictions or non-literary texts or literary texts, doesn't matter. Basta kay naa sila yung mga literary works sa Middle English. Now, the emergence of many famous literary works such as Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. So this is very famous story. Sa panahon ni Geoffrey Chaucer, no? Ang author aning Canterbury Tales is si Geoffrey Chaucer. Geoffrey. Geoffrey Chaucer inyong apelido. So, gisulat niya ang Canterbury Tales under the Middle English period. So, pag magsulat ka ani nga period, lisod po nung gamit ka og Old English na language na naman sila sa Middle English period. Okay? It's very unrealistic if the author or any authors use the type of language that are no longer existing sa kanina panahon sa Middle English. And another literary work that's very famous sa kanang panahon is Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur or d'Arthur and Langland's Piers Plowman. We are not here to delve on the characters, the message, and of course the tone and many other features of the stories. We are just here to understand that literary works are highly influential also, and those may be considered evidences that Middle English is a period of English language that existed in the history. Okay? These works represent some of the most important literary works in the English language. Meaning to say, maski na apay mga changes under development pa ang English language, again pa sa Old English, Middle English pa ni sila, but still nagyapon na produce nga mga important, no, and famous literary works sa history ng kalibutan, especially sa literature, literary history, using the Middle English or the Middle English language. Examples of Middle English. Middle English can be difficult to understand for modern speakers. For us, because we are considered as modern speakers, the language that we know of today may be very different, or if we compare it to the Old English or Middle English, because wala na nasanay ato ng mga language, especially those words. Okay. Now, the modern speakers of English language, due to its significant differences from the modern language, as I said, here is an example of Middle English from the opening lines of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. So we notice here that the words under the Middle English period are not very comprehensible. Okay? Dili gyud siya masabtan. One that April with this shower suit. So lisod siya sabton, no? As modern English speakers, I cannot myself understand this because I have difficulties in reading and comprehending the text. Okay, because of the nature or the reason that I am a modern English speaker. Okay? Natao ko 1999 na, wala ko unfortunately tao sa 1500s. So therefore, I cannot understand this type of text. But when we translate it to modern English, our language today, our English language that we know of today, this passage means that when April with its sweet-smelling showers, one that April with his showers suit, so layo kayo, no? Ang sa second line, the drugged or drugged of March hath passed to the root. Nga na ang pasabot or ang tone, nga na ang binasahan sa Middle English sa una. But in modern English, nga nila di ang pasabot if translated, has pierced the drought of March to the root. Now, as you notice, naa sila yung mga words nga dili masabtan. But there are also words, some of them are existing even before. Ang word nga March, April, or kadto na mga words, masabtan gyapon siya. Okay? Now you already understood how difficult to understand language, English language is, especially sa Middle English, no? So unsa gyud kalisod ay ang lingwahe sa una. Lisod siya sabton sa mga modern English speakers because again, we don't have any knowledge and any exposure sa ilang lingwahe. Okay, the kinds of words that they use. But in conclusion, class, the Middle English period was a time of significant change in the English language with many influences from other languages such as Old Norman French and Latin. Despite the difficulties in understanding it, Middle English produced some of the most famous literary works in the English language. Although lisod siya sabton, kato na mga words of Middle English, the language of Middle English period in general is very difficult to understand. Now, we can agree naman na nakaproduce gihapon ang mga authors ng famous literary works na nag-exist gihapon or famous gihapon hangtod kuman. Okay? Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and many other works or literary works. So it's just amazing to know nga naagihapon sila na-produce even though the language is not really comprehensible, okay, at that time. And especially when read by the readers coming from modern English speakers, no? Understanding Middle English is essential to understand the development of the English language and its literature. Meaning to say, to understand Middle English is very crucial still, because we cannot know the modern English of today if we don't understand our history, especially the philological or linguistic history of the English language. Okay, so that's basically it. That's our topic for today, class. And I will conduct a quiz sa inyo, ha? Okay? Sa Flare ninyo. And then, mo notify ni siya sa inyong Flare just this day. Paningkamutan na ako nga maka-apas ko pag-post sa inyong quiz because our coverage for our quiz is the midterm coverage also. Okay? Kani, katong lesson 1, lesson 2. Okay? So I'll stop sharing and I'll stop recording.